What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Deloitte U.S. Audit CEO, Lara Abrash. Lara was voted 2022's most powerful woman in accounting by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And prior to her role as CEO, she served as COO while maintaining client responsibility for the firm's largest and most complex clients. Her passion for diversity and innovation came together through her involvement in the Girls Who Code organization. But in all of her involvement in technology and her community, there is one leadership role that you may not know about. She is team manager of her competitive softball league team. Lara brings her expertise playing first base and her love of her favorite baseball team, the New York Mets, to the show today. And you'll have to head over to my Instagram to see that Lara is our first ever guest to show up sporting a jersey for the occasion.
Do you want to be a risk taker? If you want to be on the carousel, you're likely not going to be a risk taker, and that's okay, but that means you're going to get the ride that has little ups and little downs. If you want that roller coaster feel, you've got to be willing to take risks, and failing is more than okay. Matter of fact, failing should be a necessity for everybody, because if you're not failing, you're probably not taking the right risks.
Lara, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here.
So here you are, CEO, major corporation, unbelievable responsibilities every day, and yet you love playing softball.
Well, this is a real story, Don. Bases loaded, down by 2 runs, and I'm a pull hitter. Just as I get up to the plate, the person who's playing first says, "Put on the shift." Slowly, the left fielder moves over a little left, the center fielder moves over left, the shortstop backs up, the third baseman backs up. Now the right fielder is essentially in left field. And the first baseman's like, "More!" They had figured me out. So almost the entire team is on the left side of the field, mostly in the outfield. And I said to myself, if I could just for once in my life not have a pull hit, all I kept thinking is I've got to get these runners moving. I stepped into the plate, and with all my might, I just prayed when I swung the ball, I would not pull it. And you wouldn't believe it. It was the best single grand slam you've ever seen. I hit it to center field. I freaked them all out because they were all in left field. The 3 runners scored. I thankfully didn't have to get past first base because that's getting harder these days. And we won the game with what I call a grand slam single.
A grand slam single. That is awesome. You adjusted in the moment to create the opportunity to offer success to your team.
Yes.
Sports is such a valuable opportunity for us to go learn things and skills that can make us greater later. Tell me, what has sports meant to you in your development as a leader?
Oh my God, it means everything. A lot of people, when they talk about their kids playing sports, they wonder if they're not going to play in the major leagues, what are they really learning? And when you start to really sit back and think about it, there's so many things I learned. One, you don't have to be the best player to lead a team. A lot of leaders feel like they have to show up being the best, but ultimately their job is to assemble the best. And then really understanding how people communicate with each other. On my team, I play first, so I call the situation in the field. Take that to a work environment. You have people have different ways that they need to be communicated with. You need to be clear. and training, all those years of practice. You don't practice because it's going to happen in a game, the first game after you practice. It could be 10 games later. It's
Right.
something you learn to do. You get a game. And a lot of that happens again in the work field. Really, the culture of a sports environment, the friendships you form, the ability to connect even with the other team when you win, what it means, and really reflecting on the positivities of a team coming together and doing in a synchronistic way the things that they want to do every game. But it takes a lot of work. It isn't always in the moment that something is learned and dealt with. It's from all those experiences and all the practice you've had.
Wow. What a powerful lesson, too, that you don't have to be the best player to lead a team. You have to be willing to assemble the best players to lead a team. And yes, direct correlation right into the workforce. I know you grew up with three older brothers, and sports, as we've defined here, always been a big part of your life. Talk to me about competition growing up in your household.
Three older brothers treated me like the little kid, the little sister. I wanted to be better than them. Competition is really how do you make yourself better? And when you're a girl and you're the youngest, you're not going to be the biggest. So, what are the other ways I can beat them? Can't be I can get to mom first to tell on them. Like you had to figure out creative ways to beat them. I also learned like what did losing feel like?
Mm,
Winning isn't about winning. Winning is about how you win. When you're in the competition, how are you actually winning? What's the definition of winning? Is it that the score is 7-6? Or are there other qualitative outcomes? So when I would be going against my brothers many, many years ago, it wasn't that I could beat them at basketball in the driveway. It was, did I see myself getting better? Did they look at me differently this week versus last week? Like, wow, all of a sudden she can do something she did. Did I see it in myself? Did they finally ask me out for an ice cream after because I wasn't so annoying? So beating competition is not measured by a score. It's really how you approach it, how you learn things after. And if they looked at me like I got a little bit better, even if I lost, I felt like I won.
we had Condoleezza Rice on. She talked about being a young intern at the White House, but her knowledge and her ability to be athletically competitive with others suddenly changed the way she was treated on Monday morning. It becomes almost an entree point for some if we're willing to go out there and throw ourselves into the competition.
Oh, for sure. You don't want to be threatening in a corporate world, but you most certainly don't want to be afraid. You can't leave it in the dugout. You got to bring it out in the field and you got to try to do your best. And if the competition sees you hitting homers right before the game, having them get a little bit nervous and see you getting pretty good that you may beat them is a good thing.
When they all shift to the left field, that's a sign that they're worried about you hitting it out there. That's
Yeah.
awesome. You mentioned your mother. I know she was an incredible influence on you. In fact, I've read that she taught you that you could be anything you wanted to be. Nothing was going to stop you from your ability to kind of achieve at your very best. Share with me a little of the ways that she impacted you and how are you passing that on today?
Well, she's definitely the leader of my team. She was all about making the best team around her. She was born in the early 1940s. She probably doesn't want me to share this on a podcast. She'll kill me later. But when she was growing up, she was basically told after high school, you can either become a secretary or a nurse or find someone and marry them and have them take care of you. College wasn't in the cards for her. And her brother, ironically, did get to go to college and became an accountant. I always find that funny. She got married, she had 4 children, and it was tough raising 4 kids. She didn't get to go to college because she raised all 4 of us, and I was super proud of her. She went back and put herself through school so that she and I graduate from college at the same time. She's amazing.
Yeah.
In the time she had, she became a role model to me. We often talk about people telling someone how to do something. I actually think it's showing you how to do something. And I would watch my mom work 2 jobs, maybe sometimes 3 jobs, but at the same time, really get engaged in what was happening in the 60s. I mean, there was a movement going on and she was super engaged in it. I would observe her supporting politicians. I would observe her doing marches. And then eventually she did start talking about the work she and others had done for women. She said to me, baby, we put in the work for you so that you could be whatever you want to be. And you can do that. When I entered the world as a professional, I never thought for a moment that I was going to have to get married quickly and find someone to take care of me. I could be what I want to be. And a lot of that came from the things she showed me, didn't tell me. She's my number one role model, my idol, and she's still a great mom to me. Everybody still needs a mom, no matter how old they are. And she tells me what to do as much as she can.
Now, tell me about your best athletic influence. Maybe someone who played into teaching you lessons that you might even think of today as a leader who did so through athletics.
For me, it was my high school softball coach, Frank Catalano. He was a teacher in my high school who also agreed to coach. At that time, I was a really good hitter, but my fielding was pretty poor. And I would say, can I stay late after the shag fly balls? Maybe on the day we're not practicing. We spent hours and hours where I would just go out and shag fly balls. And Frank always was out there with me. And he always put himself out there to do whatever he could do to make me better. I mean, he was essentially selfless to put the effort in. And then at one point, he would say, "You're beating yourself up too much. You're actually doing pretty good out there." He cared about us. It wasn't about the team itself and the games. He truly took the time to invest in each of us individually and then as a team. I'm a big believer in leadership, which is very different, Don, than being a manager. Managers manage outcomes, leaders lead people. And Frank was a leader for me. He was somebody who was invested in me, invested in each one of us, and tried to make us better.
What a great lesson he's teaching. Leadership is so different than managing. How are you passing along the lessons he taught you?
Well, starting with looking at the team around me and trying to inspire them to be the best they can be every day. Why are we here? What's going to make us tick? Do we have purpose? Work hard, play harder. You spend a lot of time of your life working. Are you with people you actually want to be with? So I try to create a collegial environment, an environment where they foster together and treat them both as individuals and a team. Individually, working with them to let them be the best they could be. For some people, it's you're really awesome at this, but you need to do that. And for some people, it's you're really awesome at this, and this is your superpower. Go forward. The hardest part is how do they come together? You could have 10 people working with you, and if they are great individually, but they don't know how to be a team, you're going to fail. So, leadership is really about taking those different pieces of the puzzle and figuring out how to bring them together so they're operating at their very best and that they're leaders of the next generation in the organization. With 16,000 people, it really is about setting an inspirational vision, getting people excited, letting people know that they can be their authentic selves. But each and every day, I'm going to be Coach Catalano and I'm going to stay after and shag some fly balls with them.
I love that. So, one of the most overused words in the corporate world today is team, me and my team. The truth is, most of them are really not teams. Most organizations are just a group of independent contractors waiting on their next opportunity. You've experienced team. You've had a great coach, Catalano. You've served as one. Coach us as people who are trying to build a team. What are some ways that we can start thinking about taking a group of individuals and molding them, creating that environment where magic happens?
It starts with how you present yourself to the team. I'm a big proponent on being transparent and authentic, sort of relating to your team, you're connecting to your team, having them feel that you truly are supportive of them. You know what's going on in their lives, you know what's important to them. At the end of the day, we all pump our blood through our body the same way. The fact that you're the leader of the team doesn't really make you different in a lot of ways other than you're the leader. This engagement with the team, it has to start that they see you as somebody they want to run through walls for, that you're someone who's going to engage, take care of them. And it's not just a job. A job is you do your work and go home. This is about making them better. So it starts with the leader itself being able to be someone that you can talk to them, clear communications, who can be open, who can be authentic, who shows clear support. And then it really does get down to figuring out what is the goal for the team. I remember on my current leadership team, when I first met with them, I brought in a picture of a crew team and talked about when they're all going at the same pace and they've hit the water at the exact same time, the same amount of water's coming up. They call that swing.
Right.
By the way, it was incredibly helpful because we had that meeting 6 months before the pandemic. And we didn't have time anymore to talk about who was going to take which oar and go at what speed. The boat was going, the water was choppy, and the team did a great job. And that's what you want out of a team. So I talked about how that was going to be our objective. Every leader needs to say to the team, this is what we want to be, and get them really rallied around and commit to it. And talk about, how do we do this? When do we call each other out? Who's good at this? When do I use my voice?
You know, it's one thing to think about pulling together a group of folks, maybe a leadership team or even a softball team. You rise to the place where 16,000 people look up and see your role in leadership. How do you cascade that? How do you take what you're talking about right now and actually allow that leadership model that you're referring to actually flow throughout?
You set the example. You don't tell people what being a leader looks like or what's important. You show them. When I talk about how important it is, everybody can come in and be their authentic selves. I set those examples with how I operate. So people see it. It's a virtuous cycle. It's the immediate team that you have around you, getting all of us to align on what's important. A lot of that is active listening, not talking at them, but having the team sort of come up with the answer and then having them create these similar environments in the places they are, and really deciding, how do I create culture? In an elevator, if they said 5 things to describe what it meant to work with our organization, how would they describe it? Those are the things that from the very top we're talking about. How do we show this, not say it? And then I spend a lot of time with the 16,000 people. I don't just sit in a corner office and watch my Mets games, although I do want to watch my Mets games. A big part of this is connecting the dots. Is the message getting through? Are they really feeling it when they come in? Are they seeing what you're saying is sort of talking heads, or are they feeling it? And then it gives me the ability to sort of course adjust. I take pride in really spending time with the entire organization up and down and setting things by example. So when I come into a room, I talk about how important diversity is to me. I tell stories. It's not just something I say we're going to do, I make it real. And then all of a sudden, over time, you see those changes. I would say the pandemic for us was a great example, Don, to do that. And I was very vulnerable with our entire organization. I had weekly calls.
Mm.
I would tell them stories about my mom, my kids, how I became the mule for the family. I was the one who would go to the grocery stores to get groceries for my mom, my husband's mom, my brother. All of a sudden, I would go into meetings with people who'd only been here 6 months, and they were telling their stories. They felt like this was a place they could be vulnerable and that nobody had the answer.
You talked about being an active listener. Talk to me about how we can learn the art of active listening.
There's listening and then there's active listening. Is not just engaging with someone, it's showing demonstrated interest, it's eye contact, it's giving them your full attention. It's showing the curiosity of what they do so that they start to realize that this is a couple clicks down. It's the empathy side. When you hear something in the conversation that isn't just about the work, but maybe the challenges that they're dealing with, playing that back so they understand, like, I understand this is hard for you. If there's something that excites them, say, well, that excites me too. Show them a personal side at the end of the conversation. Talk about what you're going to do this weekend. Do you have any vacation plans? If I'm on a call and we did something, I'd say, I was talking to one of our professionals and they gave me this great idea and we're putting it in play. And they start to realize these conversations mean something.
I love it. I read a LinkedIn article that you wrote in which you had this line: I have been much more intentional to broaden my accessibility and promote connectivity. I actively listen, putting aside my own reaction and letting their reaction come first. I ask questions and truly engage. Here you are, the most powerful woman in accounting, and yet you're recognizing the need to hear things differently and be more intentional. You're leaning into the very things that helped get you to where you are today, maybe even more forcefully than you were before.
I'm a student of self evolution, learning, reflection, feedback, and evolving. I'm not the full package. And what you need in different situations changes. At the time I talked about this, it was clear our people needed a different type of leader. You may need a leader who's just going to steer the ship or give you a direction. We're in a crisis. And when you're in a crisis, you need to have a different level of intentionality. You have to be open to taking feedback. You have to be open to being vulnerable that you're not, in fact, perfect. You have to read the situation. Certain leadership skills come to play at different times, and you may have to course adjust. Go to people around you, go to the coaches that you have around you to both tell you if you're hitting it into foul territory or straighten out your stance. Leadership is somebody who can truly want to evolve. I needed to be different for what this organization needed. And in hindsight, it's who I am. You can't fake it either. You can't fake leadership. It just allowed me to bring out a side of me that hadn't seemed appropriate in a corporate environment in the roles I was in. But in this role at this time, it was a source of strength, but it was something I had to reflect on and say, am I willing to put myself out there? And I did.
While sports is great, parenting is such a great place for us to be able to connect around so many things. You and your husband, Gary, have two children, Nicholas and Samantha.
Yes.
And I know you've talked openly about the lessons Nicholas has taught you. I was taken by the words you shared about Nicholas. Do you mind sharing a little bit with us?
Yeah. Inclusion is so important to me. And it's a perfect example of showing and not telling. I found a lot of leaders would get up on stage and talk about how for a company, diversity, equity, inclusion was important. And they would start giving business statistics. If you really want to see change in behavior, you have to get to people's hearts and minds, not just the minds. You have to get to their hearts. I decided that I was going to share a story about Nicholas. When he was in preschool, I got a call from the preschool and they said to me, can you come in with your husband? And we came in and they told us, Nicholas is a little different from the other kids. We think you should go get him checked out. And I said, well, different how? And they started telling me he sits in other kids' laps. He doesn't always say the right thing. He laughs at the wrong time. And I started thinking, well, he's 4 years old. Like, who has this all figured out? But we took him to a doctor and they told us in the room that he may have something called Asperger's. And we got him a bunch of help through his school. We brought him in, and the help is great. Gets some special attention. He gets to sit in the front of the class. He gets extra time for tests. In the early years of elementary school, it was great. But as he got older, the things that were challenges became more obvious to the people around him and made him different. He was starting to get picked on. He wasn't particularly coordinated. That's something that comes along with the course. He was getting pulled into the back of the room for tests and getting extra time. He was awkward. I remember starting to get calls at home from the teachers talking about all of this. As a matter of fact, one day I remember coming home and he was crying in the bathroom. That was his crying spot. I called the school. I said, what happened today? They said, he's crying. I said, yes. And they said, that's a good thing. How is that a good thing? And they said, because he didn't cry at school. He was able to hold it in until he got home. And no parent wants to hear that their kid has that much hurt. Over that period of time, he started getting better in the school environment. Teachers told us everything that made him different made him so great in the class. He made people laugh. He always said the different thing. And then by the time we were getting out of elementary school, we thought, well, he's on a path. Things seem to be a lot better. All that extra attention helped. And right before he entered middle school, he had his first seizure.
Mm.
We started having to take him into a whole bunch of doctor appointments and all started again. He had to sit in the front of the bus because they were afraid that he'd have a seizure. He couldn't sit in the normal places with the quote unquote cool kids. He couldn't do after school activities unless they had a nurse there. He also had to sit in the front of the class. All those things were happening. And the kids were relentless on him again. It was just another really, really tough time for him. And when he was nearing the end of middle school, he said, mommy, daddy, can I go to a different high school? So we started looking and we found this school that seemed perfect for him because it was small and it had kitchen tables. And the kids would come in and they would actually talk as teams about the topics at hand. The teachers weren't teaching, they'd throw a topic out and they'd talk to each other. And that's what he wanted. He just wanted a place where his voice mattered. And about a month after him starting that new school, I overhear my daughter in the kitchen with him. And she says, Nicholas, how's school? Which in itself was shocking for all the parents on the phone. And he said, it's great. I finally found a place I fit in. That's what it means to have an inclusive environment, that somebody who's different feels like their differences makes them part of things, that's what we're thriving and looking for. And it's made him wonderfully resilient. He's a wonderful, wonderful child, but he had a really tough first 14 years of his life.
Mm.
I did ask his permission, Don. Years ago, I realized he was getting older. I said, are you okay if I tell this story? Because it could help others. And like you, Don, the number of people that have come back to me to say, I have a similar situation with my child. Thank you so much for sharing. But Nicholas needed to know that his story was out there.
And opening doors for other people.
Yes, exactly.
And as the father of a son on the autism spectrum, I'm grateful that you, as a leader, are doing exactly that. A few years ago, you raised your hand to lead a pretty significant audit transformation effort at Deloitte. I know you said at the time the words audit and innovation are generally not words that flow together, but you saw this as an opportunity to adapt and embrace change. Tell me about stepping into that space.
I'm in a profession that has been around for hundreds of years. We have a noble role in society. We're here to really protect the capital markets. And the way we were doing the work we were doing just wasn't up with the times. I mean, I often talked about how our professionals could, book a dinner reservation and order sneakers outside of Deloitte, and then they would come in and they would have the same old way of looking at things. And I asked to take the lead in this. It was a role that didn't exist. I wanted to transform how we did the work we did. I wanted to digitize it. I wanted to create data being an important part of it. How could analytics and artificial intelligence be a key part of what we do? Really transform the experience for our people. I often talk about our clients, but I'll tell you, my big passion was I don't want my kids to have this type of life. I want them to have a modern life when they start working. And it was a huge risk for me, completely out of my swim lane, role that doesn't exist. Odds of success were pretty low. I used to say, well, if I get it partially right, I may still look like I did okay because it was so unlikely I'd be successful because our people, in particular, our most senior partners, were like, why would I do something different? This is just not the way we do it. It was a massive, massive risk. Ultimately, it all worked out. I was able to get those hearts and minds. But for all of us on this call today, first, you just got to decide as an individual, do you want to be a risk taker? If you want to be on the carousel, you're likely not going to be a risk taker. And that's okay. But that means you're going to get the ride that has little ups and little downs. If you want that roller coaster feel, you've got to be willing to take risks. And failing is more than okay. Matter of fact, failing should be a necessity for everybody because if you're not failing, you're probably not taking the right risks. It's about failing fast. So you've got to decide where you are on the risk matrix. If you looked at any of my psychological studies of me, I'm probably not somebody who, by definition, is a risk taker. I still have the same person cut my hair from 40 years ago. That's about as low risk taking as you could possibly get. But my passion, my ambition, and my competitiveness pushes that risk thing forward because I know if I don't do it, I'm not going to get to that next level. It's an internal things leaders have to go through, but I would just say, it's not silly risk. Like don't all of a sudden bet the farm, but realize like you have to be willing to put yourself out there and take risks. And if you fail, fail fast. Just know that it happened.
Failing should be a necessity. Be vulnerable, always be evolving. What kind of advice would you give to the rest of us about that willingness to step out?
First, just a broad comment I often share is a goal is not a goal until it's said out loud. Talk about putting yourself out there. A big piece of it is really starting to decide what you want. Probably 15 years ago, I was at a meeting and someone asked me, what did I want to be in the future? And I apparently said I wanted to be the CEO. I didn't remember that until I got a congratulations note when I became the CEO saying, it's so funny. I was at a meeting, maybe 20 years ago, and you said that. And I was like, oh my God, how obnoxious was I to make a comment like that? But I said it. And it's okay. You can't be overly ambitious. You got to figure out how to thread that line, but you most certainly need to know it's okay to put yourself out there. I don't think about rules. It's not about the person who plays first or second. It's really about what's the experience that you're getting by the things you're doing. And then you start to think about what's the mosaic of things that you want to have and what's going to make the ultimate path to where you want to go. In my example, I realized that to get to the next level, people were going to want to see, is she somebody who could create a vision? Is she somebody who could transform? Can she show us that she's strategic? Can she bring people along behind her? Those are really important things, but you have to be able to say, well, what are the things that you want to do? When I'm thinking about giving advice to people, I'd say, what's the next role or two? It's not the title, it's what are the experiences you're going to get and how do they complement what you have to get you to where you think you want to go? Do you want to have a global role because it gives you a global experience? You want to roll with your customers, so you're customer facing, whatever those things are. A lot of people get themselves tied up on I'm the VP or this, or I'm the EVP of that. The best advice I could give is think about those experiences, but you've got to put yourself out there and let people know ultimately what you want to do. Otherwise, they don't know, and then you're not going to get opportunities likely.
Golly, I'm ready to come to work for you right now. So you've had several mentors. We talked about your mom, we talked about Coach, but I read and saw some about a senior partner named Greg Durant, who very early on, 2 weeks into your time in a new role, that he really leaned in to be a mentor to you. Talk to me about the importance of finding that mentor and then being one.
Yeah, so I was in a new role. Greg had asked me to come join him serving a big client. I was only there for 2 weeks, and I did not feel I was being successful. I was getting approached by the client to answer questions, and rather than answering them, I was afraid. I was afraid I was gonna mess up, so I joked to people, I sort of had like I was like a bakery with, like, bakery tickets. I had, like, 20 memos of questions that the client had brought in, and I couldn't answer any of them because I was so afraid of getting it wrong. It was a big role, big client, and it was about 3 days before my wedding, and Greg comes up to me and says, "Let's grab a drink. I've got some friends coming over tonight." I'm like, "No, no, no, I can't. I have a flower appointment." He's like, "You don't have a choice." We're in the car on the way there. He thankfully doesn't do this at his house, and he says, "How's everything going?" I'm in my head thinking, should I be honest with him? He asked me to come here, or should I just say something to get him off? And I decided to be honest. And I told him that I was really struggling because I just wasn't confident in getting it right. And I was afraid to let him down, to let people down. And he looked at me. He said, "Do you know why I brought you here? I brought you here because I believe in you. I have your back. You're not gonna be perfect, but I know the in the big scheme of things who you are. Now go start answering those questions." When you think about mentorship, you start to think about somebody who has the utmost confidence in you. So confidence in mentorship is really important. Sometimes we think about mentorship being the person who tells you the things that you could do better or give you the advice for the situation you're in, but sometimes it's really the person who is creating the swell of confidence that you need. It was a 3-minute conversation, but it completely changed the trajectory of what I did. And he's also the same person who told me years ago, not only are you going to be a partner at our firm, you're going to be on our board of directors. I'd been with the company for 8 years. And you know what? I became a partner and I sat on the board of directors. And that's confidence. I don't think he was crazy. I think he saw something and he felt like, I'm just going to say these things. So it's also good to give people dreams. While I did say to you, my mom told me I could be anything I wanted, she was a waitress. She worked at our school. I didn't have people around me that sat in a corporate environment. Greg Durant sat in a corporate environment. So when Greg Durant said you could be on the board of directors, that was like my mom saying to me I could be whatever I wanted to be.
Wow, you're right. I mean, most often when we think about mentorship, we're thinking about someone who's going to sit and offer you a little pathway as opposed to offering that confidence. And confidence projects out into everything you do, especially into leadership.
Yes.
I've actually been blessed with a 30-year career in journalism, and I've asked some of the best coaches, best athletes, even some of the best C-level executives, if they can identify one habit that they built into their daily routines that allowed them to separate themselves from other people, a habit that they leaned into every day that they felt gave them an advantage. And I'd love to know from you what that habit might be.
The importance of brand. What a brand is how someone describes you when you get off the elevator. That brand needs to differentiate them. So when you think about the habits, the things you do, you're forming what people think of you every single day. While there's probably a lot of things they would say on the elevator, for me, I was always somebody who was passionate. Passionate about people, passionate about our clients, passionate about the work I do, passionate about each other. And there's a lot of things that people can bring their superpower. Passion lets me focus on what's the right thing at the moment, because it's not about me. When people see leaders as being about themselves, they see right through it. Passion means I'm focused on the best thing for all of us. Every day I try to bring in, it's sort of who I am. As you could probably tell, I'm passionate for the Mets. If you have it, it gives you the fortitude to work through so many other things. I could talk about resilience. Passion is a part of being resilient. If you have passion, it allows you to bounce back. It allows you to take risks. Passion is sort of a central thing to a lot of different leadership types, and it is self-reflection and being willing to change. In one of my reviews, someone referred to me as Lara 2.0. Then I was like, oh, I remember Lara 1.0 and I remember Lara 0.0. Maybe today I'm Lara 4.0, but it meant that those people saw, I listened, I took stock, and I learned. And that in combination with just wanting to be the best in your trade has been sort of probably a special sauce for me.
I love it. Student of self-evaluation. What a great gift. I am so thankful that you created time, that you wore your jersey, that you were ready to represent, and that you hit that shot to right field. Good to see a walk-off single that is a 3-run walk-off single. Thank you today for joining us and being a corporate competitor.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
What an incredible leader. What incredible stories. One of the 3 takeaways I really pulled from today's session is when she shared the story of her son, Nicholas, the touching story about the challenges there, but what it taught her and how she was able to then translate what it taught her into a discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion within her own environment and the importance of including others and what it means to truly include others, and how that conversation with her team was different because she told it from a personal moment. That vulnerability that she brought to it was just so touching, and an incredible leadership gift that she offered to others. The second nugget that really stood out to me was failing being a necessity. We need to learn to fail gracefully and better, and always constantly evolve. She talked about being involved in that transformation of her industry and trying to become engaged in teaching others how to see the future, not the same way that the past had been seen in their space. That willingness to recognize that there was a possibility they would fail along the way, but in doing so, the industry would be better as a result. And then finally, my third nugget I loved was when she talked about the importance of understanding the difference between leadership and being a manager. As she grew in her management roles, she grew to also understand what it was going to take for her to be that leader that others would want to follow, that leader that I want to go work for right now. What a powerful exchange. And I hope that you enjoyed them as much as I did. Now, I want to end today by shouting out one of our listeners, a young man named Noah Compton. I met Noah at an event in Orlando in which he stayed to the very end, taking pictures for everyone else that was there. But he did so because he wanted a little extra time at the end to ask questions about how to engage in leadership discussions as he was growing his personal leadership style. Noah, you inspired me. I hope the idea that you did all of that to get better inspires others. And today, I hope we are all better corporate competitors. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir. How
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.